A lost sheep kept running back to the cliff. Then farmers heard something below. The first time the sheep ran back toward the cliff, Thomas Reed thought she was simply frightened. It was a cold, windy morning in late February, the kind of morning when the hills of Northumberland looked endless and lonely beneath a low gray sky. Mist dragged itself along the stone walls, rainwater shone in the grass, and the sea, far below the western cliffs, roared with the deep, steady voice of winter. Thomas had been repairing a broken gate near the upper pasture when he saw the sheep burst through the fog like a white ghost. She came running downhill from the cliffs, not walking, not grazing, running. Her fleece was soaked and muddy. Bits of bramble clung to her sides. One ear tag had torn loose and dangled at an angle. She stumbled once on the uneven ground, recovered, and kept coming, bleating so loudly that Thomas's old sheepdog, Finn, lifted his head from beside the truck and barked. Thomas dropped the fence wire. "Easy," he called. "Easy now." The sheep was one of his. He recognized her at once, even through the rain and mud. Number 47, Maisie. A small, stubborn ewe with a black patch around one eye and an impressive talent for finding every gap in every fence. She had been bottle-fed as a lamb by Thomas's daughter, Grace, after her mother rejected her, and because of that she had never behaved like the rest of the flock. She followed people too closely, stole feed from buckets, and once wandered into the farmhouse kitchen during a storm and refused to leave until Grace gave her toast. But Maisie was heavily pregnant. She should have been with the lower flock near the lambing barn, not up near the cliffs. Thomas hurried toward her, holding out both hands. "Maisie, what are you doing up here?" The ewe stopped several yards away, sides heaving, eyes wide. She bleated once. Then she turned and looked back toward the cliff path. Thomas followed her gaze. The upper pasture sloped toward a line of wind-bent hawthorn trees, and beyond them the land rose again before dropping sharply into a rocky sea cliff. The area was fenced, but the winter storms had battered the old posts for weeks. Thomas had already planned to check that section after finishing the gate. Maisie stamped one hoof. Then she turned and ran back toward the cliff. Thomas swore under his breath. "Finn!" The dog was already moving. Thomas climbed into the quad bike and started after them. Rain stung his face. The tires slipped in wet grass. Maisie ran ahead in frantic bursts, stopped to look back, then ran again. Finn kept wide, instinctively trying to turn her away from danger, but each time he got close, Maisie dodged him and continued toward the cliffs. That was the first thing that made Thomas uneasy. A frightened sheep would run away from pressure. Maisie was running toward something. He found her near the broken fence. The storm had torn two posts loose along the cliff boundary. A section of wire sagged low enough for sheep to push through. Beyond it, the ground narrowed into a rough track of grass and stone leading to the cliff edge. Maisie stood at the gap, shaking, bleeding toward the drop. Thomas cut the engine. "Maisie," he said carefully, "come away." The ewe turned toward him. Then she shoved through the broken fence and disappeared beyond the hawthorns. Damn it. Thomas scrambled off the quad and followed, keeping one hand on the fence as wind slammed against him. Finn stayed beside him, whining softly now. The dog did not like the cliff path. Neither did Thomas. It was steep, slick, and dangerous in good weather. In winter rain, it was treacherous. Maisie stood 20 yards ahead near the edge, too near. Her body faced the cliff, head lowered, ears forward. She bleated again. Thomas moved slowly. "Maisie, no, come back now." The ewe looked over the edge, then back at him, then over the edge again. Thomas froze. From below the cliff came a sound. At first he thought it was only the sea breaking against rocks. Then he heard it again, a cry, thin, faint, almost lost beneath the wind. Not a gull, not a lamb, a human cry. Thomas's blood turned cold. He dropped to his knees and crawled the last few feet toward the edge, keeping his weight low. Finn lay flat beside him, ears pinned. Maisie stood behind them now, still trembling, still staring downward. Thomas looked over. The cliff did not drop straight into the sea at this point. About 15 feet below the edge, there was a narrow ledge of grass and broken stone, then another drop toward the rocks and churning water below. On that ledge, half hidden by bracken and storm debris, was a child, a little girl. She was lying on her side, one arm caught beneath her, red coat torn and muddy. A small backpack hung from a bush nearby. Her face was pale and her hair whipped across her eyes in the wind. She was conscious, barely, crying in short, exhausted bursts. And beside her, pressed against the rock, was a tiny newborn lamb. Thomas stared. The lamb was alive, wet, shivering, curled against the girl's chest. Maisie bleated behind him. The lamb lifted its head weakly and answered. Thomas understood then. Maisie had not been lost. She had given birth near the cliffs. Something had happened. Her lamb had fallen or slid down onto the ledge, and the little girl had either tried to save it or had fallen with it. Thomas grabbed his phone. No signal, of course. "Grace!" he shouted, though his daughter was nowhere nearby. The wind tore his voice apart. He looked down again. "Can you hear me?" he called to the girl. "Don't move, I'm getting help." The girl tried to look up. Her voice was barely audible. "Please," she cried, "my leg hurts." Thomas's heart hammered. "What's your name?" "Ellie." "Ellie, listen to me. My name is Thomas. I'm right above you. Help is coming. Stay still." "The lamb," she sobbed. "It fell." "I see it. You did good. Stay with me." Maisie pushed closer and Thomas grabbed the broken fence wire to keep her from stepping too near the edge. "No, girl, you can't go down there." The ewe bleated in panic, desperate to reach her lamb. Finn whined and crawled backward, sensing Thomas's tension. Thomas had handled enough farm accidents to know the truth immediately. He could not climb down alone. The ledge might collapse. The girl might have a spinal injury. The lamb was weak and exposed. Maisie was panicking near the edge. The weather was worsening. One wrong move could send all of them over. He needed rescue. He needed signal. He needed another person. He looked back toward the farm, a half-mile away through mist and rain. "Finn?" he said sharply. "Home." The dog looked at him. Thomas pointed. "Go home. Grace, go." Finn hesitated. Thomas shouted, "Home." The dog turned and ran. Thomas prayed his daughter would understand. Grace Reed had been in the lambing barn when Finn arrived without her father. That alone was enough to frighten her. Finn never left Thomas in the fields unless told. The border collie burst through the open barn door soaked from rain, barking sharply, then spun in a circle and ran back out. Grace froze with a bottle of iodine in one hand and a towel in the other. "Finn?" The dog barked again, then ran a few steps toward the upper pasture and looked back. Grace dropped the towel. Her younger brother, Caleb, looked up from the straw where he was checking a ewe with twins. At 16, Caleb was tall, quiet, and trying hard to pretend he was not still a boy when emergencies happened. "What is it?" he asked. "Something's wrong with Dad." Grace grabbed the radio from the wall and clipped it to her coat. The farm radios worked better than phones in the hills. She called Thomas twice. No answer. "Caleb, call Mom. Mom's in town." "Then call her. Tell her to get the rescue team. And call Mr. Hargreaves. Tell him cliff pasture." Caleb's face went pale. "The cliff?" Finn barked again. Grace was already running. She took the second quad, following Finn through the pasture. Rain slashed sideways now and the wind had sharpened. By the time she reached the broken fence, she saw her father kneeling near the cliff edge and Maisie pacing behind him. "Dad!" Thomas turned and waved one hand sharply. "Stay back!" Grace stopped hard, boots slipping in mud. "What happened?" "Child on the ledge, injured. Maisie's lamb is down there too." Grace's face went white. "A child?" Thomas nodded toward the edge. Grace dropped to her knees and crawled closer, just enough to look. When she saw the little girl below, her breath caught. "Oh my God." Ellie was still conscious. The lamb lay against her chest, barely moving. Every few seconds, Maisie called from above, and the lamb answered with a tiny sound that broke Grace's heart. Grace lifted the radio. Emergency, emergency. This is Grace Reed at Reed Farm, Upper Cliff Pasture. We have a child injured on a cliff ledge below the fence line, approximately 15 feet down, unstable ground, rising wind. Need fire rescue, coast rescue, ambulance, and livestock vet. Repeat, child on cliff ledge. Static crackled. Then a voice replied from a neighboring farm channel. Grace, this is Hargreaves. I heard you. Calling it in now. Stay off the edge. Thomas closed his eyes in relief. Grace called down to the girl. Ellie, I'm Grace. We're getting help. You're not alone. Ellie cried softly. I tried to hold the lamb. Grace looked at the tiny animal. The lamb must have been born near the fence. Perhaps Maisie had wandered through the broken section during early labor, seeking shelter from the wind near the hawthorns. The newborn lamb, wet and unsteady, may have stumbled or been pushed by the storm down the slope to the ledge. Ellie, a child from the village or a walker's daughter, must have heard the lamb crying and climbed through the broken fence to help. Then she fell too. Where are your parents? Grace called. Ellie tried to answer, but the wind swallowed her words. Thomas looked at Grace. We need to keep her talking. Grace nodded. Ellie, how old are you? 9, the girl called weakly. 9, that's a good age. I'm 22. I still remember being 9. I had a pony who hated me. Ellie made a tiny sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Grace continued, voice shaking but steady enough. The lamb's mother is up here. Her name is Maisie. She's very bossy. Maisie bleated as if objecting. Ellie whispered, She ran away. She ran for help, Grace said. Thomas looked at his daughter. Grace looked back, and they both knew it was true. Maisie had climbed back from the cliff, run all the way toward the lower fields, found Thomas, and then kept returning to the place where her lamb and the child were trapped. She had not been asking for feed. She had not been lost. She had been leading them to the edge. 20 minutes later, the first rescuers arrived. A fire engine came as far as the farm track allowed, followed by a coast rescue vehicle and an ambulance. Thomas's wife, Helen, arrived in a muddy blue car at nearly the same time, followed by Dr. Sarah Bell, the local veterinarian. Helen ran toward the cliff pasture, face tight with fear, but stopped when Thomas waved her back. Fire Chief Ian Mercer took command. He was in his 50s, broad, calm, and had rescued enough people from cliffs, tractors, floods, and collapsed barns to know that speed without control killed more people. No one near the edge without a line, he ordered. Anchor points on the truck in that oak. Coast team sets the descent. Keep the sheep back. Maisie did not want to be kept back. The ewe became frantic when rescuers approached the edge. She fought the temporary pen Thomas and Grace rigged from hurdles, shoving against the metal, bleeding toward the lamb below. Her distress agitated the lamb, and the lamb's cries made Ellie sob harder. Dr. Bell crouched beside Maisie. She's just lambed, she said. She's exhausted and terrified. We need to calm her without separating her too far. How? Grace asked. The vet looked at the cliff, then at the ewe. Let her see the edge, but not reach it. Keep her voice near the lamb. It may help both of them. So they moved the hurdles closer, safely behind the rescue line. Maisie could see toward the ledge, but could not fall. She stood there shivering, calling down. The lamb answered weakly. Chief Mercer glanced at Thomas. That sheep found them? Thomas nodded. She wouldn't stop running back. The chief looked at Maisie with something like respect. Good girl. The rescue descent began. A coast rescue technician named Leah Morgan clipped into the rope system and lowered herself carefully over the edge. Grace stood beside Helen behind the safety line, hands locked together. Thomas helped hold Maisie's pen steady. Finn lay flat in the grass, eyes fixed on the ledge. Leah reached Ellie first. Hi, love, she said gently. I'm Leah. I'm going to check you over, all right? Ellie nodded, crying. Leah radioed up. Child conscious, possible lower leg fracture, cold exposure, no obvious major bleeding. Lamb is alive but hypothermic. Ledge is unstable but holding. Dr. Bell called down, "Wrap the lamb if you can. Don't let it roll." Leah carefully tucked the lamb into an emergency thermal wrap while another rescuer descended with a child-sized rescue stretcher. The lamb bleated weakly, and Maisie went wild above, slamming against the hurdles. "Maisie!" Grace shouted. "Stop!" The ewe froze at Grace's voice, trembling. Grace softened. "They've got your baby. They've got her." Dr. Bell looked at her. "Her?" Grace swallowed. "I don't know, it just felt like her." The vet almost smiled despite the tension. "We'll check later." Getting Ellie into the stretcher took time. Her right leg was trapped partly beneath a loose stone and twisted painfully. Leah stabilized it before freeing her. Ellie cried out once and Maisie answered with a desperate bleat that echoed across the cliff. Then came the most dangerous part, lifting the child. The wind had strengthened, the rope swayed, the ledge crumbled slightly beneath Leah's boot. Thomas felt Helen grip his arm so hard it hurt. Slowly, inch by inch, Ellie was raised. When her stretcher cleared the edge, paramedics rushed in. Helen covered her mouth and cried openly. Grace stepped back, shaking. Ellie was pale and soaked, but alive. As the paramedics wrapped her in blankets, her eyes moved past them. "The lamb," she whispered. Dr. Bell was already waiting for the second lift. Leah secured the lamb in a small rescue bag and sent it up next. The tiny animal looked impossibly fragile, a wet bundle of white wool and long legs. When Dr. Bell lifted it from the bag, it barely moved. Maisie heard it. The ewe gave a low call, different from the panicked bleating before. Soft, deep, maternal. The lamb stirred. Dr. Bell worked quickly, rubbing the lamb with warm towels, checking its airway, applying warmth. "Female," she said. "Weak pulse, very cold. We need colostrum and heat now." Grace looked at Thomas. "She's a girl," she whispered. Thomas nodded, voice rough. "Aye." Maisie stretched her neck toward the lamb, desperate. Dr. Bell made a decision. "Bring Maisie close, but hold her." They opened the hurdles just enough for Maisie to approach under control. She rushed forward, then stopped when she reached the lamb. Her whole body seemed to soften. She lowered her nose and began licking the tiny face, rough and urgent, cleaning, warming, calling her back into the world. The lamb's mouth opened. A small sound came out. Everyone nearby went silent. Even Chief Mercer turned away briefly, blinking against rain. Ellie from the ambulance stretcher saw it and began crying again. "She's okay?" Grace knelt beside her. "She's alive because of you." Ellie shook her head weakly. "Because of Maisie." Grace looked at the ewe licking her lamb. "Because of both of you," she said. Only later did they learn how Ellie had come to be there. She was Ellie Carter, daughter of a local schoolteacher. That morning, before school, she had taken a shortcut along the public footpath above the Reed farm to look for her missing scarf, which she believed she had dropped during a weekend walk. The storm had damaged the cliff fence, and Ellie heard the newborn lamb crying below the path. She climbed through the gap to see it, slipped on wet grass, and slid down onto the ledge. Somehow she managed to stop herself from falling farther, but her leg was injured and she could not climb back up. Maisie had been below the fence after giving birth. Unable to reach the lamb and perhaps frightened by Ellie's fall, she had found her way back through the gap and run downhill until she found Thomas. Then she kept running back to the cliff, again and again, until someone followed. Ellie was taken to hospital with a broken ankle, mild hypothermia, and bruising. She would recover fully. The lamb, after several frightening hours under Dr. Bell's care, warmed enough to nurse from Maisie. Grace named her Hope before anyone could stop her. Thomas pretended to object. He did not object very strongly. The story spread through the village by evening. A lost sheep had saved a child. A lamb had survived a cliff fall. A dog had fetched help. Farmers, rescue workers, and veterinarians had worked together in rain and wind above a deadly drop. People repeated the details in the shop, the pub, the schoolyard, and the church car park. But the part everyone remembered was Maisie running. A heavily pregnant ewe, then a newly lambed mother refusing to leave the cliff because her baby and a human child were trapped below. Ellie's mother, Rachel Carter, came to the farm 2 days later after Ellie was released from hospital with crutches and a bright purple cast. Ellie insisted on coming too. She was pale and nervous, but determined. Maisie and Hope were in a clean pen in the lambing barn, warm under a heat lamp. Hope was standing now, wobbly but strong enough to bump her tiny head against Maisie's belly in search of milk. Maisie looked up when the visitors entered, chewing calmly as if she had not caused half the county to rethink what sheep were capable of. Ellie stopped at the pen gate. "Hi, Maisie," she whispered. The ewe blinked. Grace stood beside Ellie. "You can give her a bit of feed if you hold your palm flat." Ellie held out a handful of sheep nuts. Maisie sniffed, then ate gently. Ellie laughed through tears. Rachel Carter covered her mouth. "That sheep brought my daughter home." Thomas, standing nearby, removed his cap. "Your daughter kept my lamb alive." Rachel shook her head. "She could have died." So could Hope. The adults looked at the tiny lamb who had managed to get one leg stuck over a straw bale and looked deeply confused by it. Ellie wiped her eyes. She was crying. I couldn't leave her. Grace crouched beside her. Maisie felt the same way about both of you. After that, Ellie visited often. At first, it was to help her recover from the fear of the cliff. Her parents worried she would have nightmares forever. She did for a while. She dreamed of slipping, of waves below, of cold stone under her hands. But she also dreamed of Maisie's voice above her and the lamb's tiny warmth against her coat. The farm became a place where the frightening memory could turn into something else. She learned to help feed lambs, brush Finn, and tell the difference between normal sheep noise and trouble. She and Grace grew close, despite their age difference. Hope followed Ellie whenever she visited, nibbling at her shoelaces and once stealing a tissue from her pocket. The broken cliff fence was repaired within a week, but Thomas did more than patch it. He reinforced the entire boundary, added warning signs near the public footpath, and worked with the council to reroute the trail farther from the edge. Rescue crews inspected the cliff section and identified several unstable areas. The village school invited Chief Mercer to give a safety talk about coastal paths, weather, and why children should never climb fences to rescue animals themselves. Ellie sat in the front row during that talk, cheeks red. When Chief Mercer asked what someone should do if they saw an animal in danger, Ellie raised her hand. "Get an adult," she said. "Exactly." Then she added quietly, "Even if you really want to help." Chief Mercer nodded. "Especially then." Maisie became famous in the strange, uncomfortable way animals sometimes do when humans need a symbol. Reporters came. Thomas allowed only one interview because he did not want crowds upsetting the flock. The headline called her the hero sheep of Reed Farm. Thomas found that ridiculous. "She's still the same nuisance who breaks into feed bins," he said. Grace smiled. "A heroic nuisance." Maisie marked the occasion by knocking over a bucket. Hope grew fast. By summer, she had become one of the boldest lambs in the flock, always climbing things she should not climb and running toward Grace whenever she entered the field. Maisie watched her with a mixture of pride and exhaustion. Ellie, now walking without crutches, came on weekends and sat by the pasture fence with Hope's head in her lap. One evening, Ellie asked Grace, "Do you think Hope remembers falling?" Grace leaned on the fence. "Probably not the way we would." "Do you think Maisie remembers?" Grace looked at the ewe grazing nearby. "I think she remembers enough." Ellie nodded. "I remember," she said. Grace did not try to comfort that away. Instead, she said, "Then remember this part too. You got out. Hope got out. Maisie found help. That's part of the story." Ellie looked toward the distant cliffs glowing gold in the sunset. "I like that part," she said. "So do I." Years passed, and the story of Maisie and the cliff became part of local life. Children learned it as a warning and a wonder. Farmers told it when someone called sheep stupid. Thomas would grunt and say, "They're not stupid, they're sheep. Different thing." Finn grew old and eventually retired to sleeping near the farmhouse stove, but everyone agreed he had done his part that day too. Grace eventually took over more of the farm work, though Thomas pretended he was still in charge. Ellie, inspired by both the rescue and Dr. Bell, decided she wanted to become a veterinarian. Hope became a mother herself one spring, delivering twins safely in the lambing barn, far away from cliffs and drama. Maisie lived long enough to see them, which Grace found poetic and Thomas called sentimental nonsense, while wiping his eyes. On the 5th anniversary of the rescue, Ellie and her parents came to Reed Farm with a small wooden sign. Thomas refused at first to put it anywhere. "I'm not turning my pasture into a tourist attraction." "It's not for tourists," Ellie said. "It's for us." The sign was simple. Grace helped attach it to the reinforced fence near the safe side of the footpath. It read, "Stay behind the fence, call for help, listen when the animals warn you." Below the words, Ellie had painted a small sheep with a black patch over one eye. Maisie stood nearby, chewing grass and looking unimpressed. Thomas looked at the sign for a long time. Then he said, "Could have made the sheep less fat." Grace elbowed him. He smiled. Many years later, when Ellie did become a veterinarian, she kept a photograph on the wall of her clinic. In it, she was 9 years old, sitting on a straw bale with a purple cast on her leg, Maisie standing beside her and Hope curled across her lap. Visitors often asked about it. Ellie always told the story carefully. She told them she had made a dangerous mistake by climbing through the fence. She told them rescue should be left to trained adults. She told them about cold, fear, and the sound of the sea below. But she also told them about Maisie. "She kept running back to the cliff," Ellie would say. "Everyone thought she was lost or panicking, but she wasn't. Her lamb was below, I was below. She knew where help needed to go." Then she would pause, remembering the rain, the wind, the tiny lamb breathing against her coat. Sometimes animals don't need words. They just keep returning to the place that matters until we finally understand. And that was the truth. Maisie had not understood cliffs, emergency radios, rescue ropes, hypothermia, or human guilt. She had understood something simpler and stronger. Her baby was below, a child was below, they were crying, and she would not leave. So before we go, remember this. Sometimes what looks like panic is a message. Sometimes a lost animal is not lost at all. A sheep running back again and again to a dangerous cliff may not be foolish or frightened without reason. She may be trying to lead someone to a sound too faint for human ears, a life hidden below the edge, a rescue waiting to happen. Maisie kept running back to the cliff until the farmers heard the cry beneath them, and because they listened, a little girl and a newborn lamb were brought safely back from the edge.